The inspiration for today's sermon comes from an editorial written by columnist E.J. Deon Jr. entitled, "Can Religion Strengthen Democracy?" It was published in the Washington Post on August 25th of this year and reprinted in the Sioux City Journal. I was intrigued by this article because I am worried about whether democracy in the United States will survive recent events. If religion can help save it, then I'm all in favor of it. But I say these words with some difficulty. To say I am all in favor of religion feels like a sword piercing my heart. Religion, and specifically the Roman Catholic variety, is deeply embedded in my very core. My role model growing up was my uncle, Father Joe, who was a priest in the Diocese of Sioux City. I still have a vivid memory of him sitting on our living room couch, although we called it a Davenport at the time, praying what was called the daily office. I often coerced my two sisters to play Mass with me. I would simulate vestments by donning a bathrobe, turn away from them and mumble sounds that I thought sounded like Latin, and would give them communion by placing oyster crackers on their tongues. As I got older, I became an altar boy and memorized the Latin phrases while handing the priest the water and wine. I would stand next to him as he gave out communion. I would hold a golden tray under the person's mouth to catch any small bit of wafer that might fall, firmly believing that that tiny piece was in fact the body of Jesus. After high school, I went to Loras College in the college version of the seminary. We call it the pre-seminary. Stayed there for 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, I picked up the call, "Won't you please come to Chicago?" So I dropped out of school, dropped out of the seminary. But the connection to religion stays with me. This connection lives inside of me like a meme. I will talk about memes later in this sermon. For now, I will say that the meme is alive and well and can appear at unforeseen moments. So in that sense, it is intact. But in another way, and this is why I feel the sword piercing my heart, I now see the Catholic Church as paternalistic, bureaucratically corrupt, homophobic, hopelessly misogynist, and ultimately morally bankrupt. The result is that the religious meme within me has been dismantled, eviscerated, and cast aside. And so I live in two worlds. I have a core meme that is destroyed and intact at the same time. No wonder I am confused from time to time. So what about democracy? The fifth UU principle states, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Let's take the second part first. How alive is democracy in the United States today? Of course, we do not have a pure democracy, and that is a good thing. Pure democracy is majority rule. The problem with majority rule is, of course, the tyranny of the majority, where a majority could impose restrictions on the minority. For example, 20 years ago yesterday, after the horrific attack on 9/11, how difficult do you think it would have been to get a majority of citizens to vote to lock up all the Muslims in the United States? Probably not too difficult. In order to mitigate against such tyranny of the majority, we have a constitution, which includes a Bill of Rights. In order to change the Constitution, it requires a supermajority. 2/3 of each house and ratification by 3/4 of the states, or 2/3 of the states could call a constitutional convention. Another method to reduce the tyranny of the majority is the filibuster. The Nebraska unicameral is theoretically nonpartisan, although everyone knows who is Democrat and who is Republican. There is a filibuster in place that has been used by the minority Democrats to block voter restrictions and block subsidies for private schools. The Republicans are upset that there is no voter ID rule. Apparently, Nebraska is the only state that doesn't have that. So they are now taking this to the people in a great show of democracy by allowing citizens to vote on whether to require IDs at the voting booth. They are confident that the majority will vote for these restrictions. However, funding for the campaign is almost entirely from Marlene Ricketts, the mother of the governor and the wife of billionaire Joe Ricketts, a conservative activist. We have a different story in the United States Senate. Theoretically, the filibuster should also be an important restraint to overreach by the majority. Currently, the parties are split 50-50. In an ideal world, this would require compromise and working together for the common good. And the threat of a filibuster would make that happen. There are two problems with this. First, the 50 Republicans represent 41 million fewer citizens than the Democrats due to the weirdness of the electoral college system. Second, the populace overwhelmingly favors abortion rights and favors reasonable gun control. If those issues were put to the citizens, they would be voted in. In spite of the loudness of the anti-vaccine, anti-mask, conspiracy theory-oriented message, the majority of the populace in the United States actually supports reasonable mandates. Democracy would vote its own self-interest, in this case, if allowed to do so. By and large, the Democratic Party supports these changes. But the Republican Party is now a fascist-oriented party. Under the leadership of Mitch McConnell, the party is committed to undermining any legislative priorities of the ruling party, regardless of the consequences to the nation. If increased illness and deaths in this country make Biden and the Democratic Party look bad, then McConnell will do what he can to make sure that happens. Power is the only thing on his mind. His oath of office to defend the Constitution means nothing to him. It was the incompetence of Donald Trump that reduced the harm he did in office. Mitch is not incompetent. He is the most dangerous man in the country right now. Democracy can only be preserved if the individuals representing us have some minimum degree of ethics and some minimum degree of belief in democracy, Mitch has neither. And as long as he is in power, and as long as the Republican Party remains powerful, we are in sore trouble. Going back to the principle, Reverend Parisa Parsa further explains it this way. In our religious lives, the democratic process requires trust in the development of each individual conscience, a belief that such development is possible for each of us, as well as a commitment to cultivate our own conscience. We could call it a commitment to the value of each person. In the words of Theodore Parker, democracy means not, I am as good as you are, but you are as good as I am. My connection with the sacred is only as precious as my willingness to acknowledge the same connection to others. So let's return to Mr. Deon's question. Can religion strengthen democracy? In the first line of his article, he asks another question, which deserves some exploration. Is religion good for us? Tocqueville wrote the book Going back to Tocqueville, he argued that religion was a friend to the American experiment with democracy. Religion turns our attention and our worship to God. Without religion's focus on God, it would be too easy to turn to the worship of political leaders. As we focus on God, we have the space to entertain doubt, which leads to a humbling of our enterprises and our views of ourselves. In effect, religion makes us humble. Humility makes us more open to listening to others, to welcoming others into our inner circles, and to avoid the pride that leads us to believe that we are always right. Tocqueville also believed that merit would find its way into representative democracy because individual talent creates social power, which results in capable people being elected. He also believed that public opinion would always sway our representatives so that democracy rules even in a representative government. I would like to believe this, but events of the last few years point to a different reality. What Tocqueville did not know and could not have known is the ways in which misinformation and disinformation in our current social media universe would inflate the ignorance of the populace. He would also, I believe, have been shocked how such a populace could elect representatives, including the president and members of Congress, who are unequivocally incompetent. I will take this thought further and speak of the kind of religion that is not good for us. The kind of religion that moves us closer to tyranny rather than democracy. I am referring, for example, to the religion of ISIS or the religion of white evangelicals who pretend to worship a God of love while pledging allegiance to a racist, misogynist, xenophobic narcissist. The kind of religion that rejects science and promotes conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation. The kind of religion that preaches a God who will protect his devotees from a deadly virus so that precautions are not necessary. The kind of religion that allows for a prayer to God for forgiveness to shield sexual predators from civil consequences. The kind of religion that claims to hate the sin but love the sinner, and in the process shames those who love differently. These kinds of religion have taken root in this country. Yuval Noah Harari wrote a book entitled Sapiens, where he explored the power of memes. He noted that there are feral neurons in our brains. Think about that. Feral neurons in our brains that run amok. Sometimes they absorb information from memes and saturate other neurons with the core beliefs hidden in those memes. In the movie Inception, the protagonist finds a way to implant a core idea in his subject by taking him down into deeper and deeper levels of consciousness, dreams within dreams, until he arrives at the unconscious, where he implants a simple idea. This idea, unbeknown to the recipient, percolates up, permeates his brain, and causes him to make major changes in his life. Like COVID, disinformation has become a kind of virus that is insidious and seeks to infect all who come in contact with it. It becomes a powerfully effective meme infecting human brains. The disinformation becomes so pervasive and so integral to the person's personality that reason fails them. Once infected, people go deeper and deeper into fantastical conspiracy theories and can no longer use reason to negotiate themselves out of it. The antidote to this kind of meme infection is, I believe, the importance of science and the power of reason. It has taken us 1,000,000 years to evolve a decent prefrontal cortex or executive function that allows us to use reason. Some religious or some spiritual belief systems dismiss the importance of reason, and as a result are vulnerable to the kinds of disinformation that is so pervasive today. I hope this isn't the case, but I worry that those who believe strongly in a God in the heavens who will come and save us if we pray hard enough are vulnerable to this virus of misinformation, to these insidious memes. Similarly, those who believe in a kind of new age of mysticism that emphasizes heart or gut over mind are also vulnerable. My fear is that as more and more people become infected, and as more and more politicians, whether infected or not, I mean infected by this meme, parrot the ideas expressed in these memes in order to gain and maintain their power, that we may have gone past the tipping point. In Tocqueville's words, America will have ceased to be good, and so we are no longer great. I would add, we could lose our democracy and slowly slip, step by step, into governmental tyranny. So this is an addendum. Mr. Dion came to the conclusion that the only kind of religion that is good for us and can strengthen democracy is liberal religion. He defines liberal religion as follows. Quote, it's religion that breaks from absolutism, accepts pluralism, which is the need to live with and respect those with very different worldviews, and resists using the state to impose forms of orthodoxy on others. He does not mention Unitarian Universalism, but I think we can hold on to the value we bring to the country and that our influence is a hopeful sign. Instead, he quotes the Archbishop of Chicago, Cardinal Blaise Kupich, as an example of such liberal religion. I agree with Mr. Dion that Cardinal Kupich is as liberal as one can be and remain an archbishop. So, in spite of my general condemnation of the Catholic Church, I will quote the Cardinal in my closing words. Quote, Religion provides a space to deal with our doubts. The scriptures and the history of the saints are full of stories of people of faith who had doubts. So often people who allow for no doubt in their lives, as if doubt is a weakness, rigidly hold on to points of view because they would be shaken if they admitted uncertainty. Religion allows us to be human, and humans are full of doubts. Religion also brings us together in community, easing some of our deepest fears that we are all alone. Community life is where burdens are shared, important moments are celebrated, and we experience the comfort of depending on one another, and we learn most about ourselves. Thank you.